The day Serena Caldwell's mother-in-law took her last breath, the world didn't stop. The nurses didn't weep. The machines didn't scream. The sun didn't duck behind a cloud over the Connecticut skyline. It was just a quiet, clinical exit, a soul leaving a room. Serena stood by the bed, her fingers still interlaced with Eleanor's cold, papery hand. She felt the exact moment the tension left that hand. The exact moment the woman who had been her only real ally for 19 years became a memory. Serena's husband, Richard, stood at the foot of the bed. He didn't move. He didn't reach out. He didn't sob into his hands. He looked at his watch. Then he stepped out into the hallway. Serena followed him, not because she wanted to talk, but because the silence in the room was too heavy to bear alone. She stopped just behind the heavy fire door. She heard the click of his phone. She expected him to call his sister. She expected him to call the funeral director. "Yeah, it's done," Richard said. His voice was low, vibrating with a focused energy Serena hadn't heard in months. "The time of death is 10:14. I need you to check the liquidity of the Q3 bonds. If we move before probate is formally filed, can we bypass the freeze on the primary estate account?" No, I don't want to wait. The tax implications of the transfer are better if we trigger the clause today. Call me back in 10. Serena leaned her forehead against the cool, painted cinder block of the hospital wall. She was holding Eleanor's hospital bracelet. Eleanor Whitfield, D.O.B., March 4th, 1953. Richard was already erasing the person and replacing her with the spreadsheet. And in that moment, Serena realized that for 19 years, she hadn't been a wife. She had been a placeholder in a portfolio. But Richard had made one fatal calculation. He thought he was the only one in that hallway who knew how to count. He didn't know that Eleanor had been counting for years, and she had finally reached the sum. But before we go any further, welcome to the Unspoken Chapter, where the stories nobody told are the only ones that actually matter. We are told the big moments define us, the weddings, the births, the public celebrations, but they don't. The real stories happen in the dark, in the kitchen at 2 a.m. when you realize you're the only one who stayed up, at a dinner table when you finish a sentence and your partner is already talking to someone else, and you realize quietly that you've become invisible in your own life. We stay silent because we think silence equals peace. It doesn't. Silence is a reservoir, and eventually, the dam breaks. Today's story is about two women underestimated by the same man. One built an empire. One held a family together with threads nobody could see. This is what happens when the quiet ones finally speak. And when they do, the world shakes. If this is your kind of story, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications right now. Because the record Richard Caldwell didn't know was being kept starts here. The Sunday dinners were a ritual. Richard insisted on them. He believed that sitting at the head of a mahogany table once a week proved he was a successful man. Richard was a partner at a prestigious law firm. He was efficient. That was the word people used. He navigated the world as if it were a series of obstacles to be cleared. Serena sat to his right. For 19 years, she had played the role of the gracious wife. She was a successful interior designer. Actually, she was more than that. She was an architectural strategist. She took broken spaces and made them functional. But at Richard's table, her career was a hobby. "Serena's doing that little project in Providence," Richard would say to his colleagues, waving a hand as if brushing away a fly. "Keeps her busy while I handle the real estate litigation for the harbor project." Serena would smile. She would take a sip of her Cabernet. She would stay quiet. Why? Because she loved him. Because she thought that by shrinking herself, she was making room for him to be big. She thought that was what a partnership was. Eleanor sat at the other end of the table. Eleanor didn't speak much during these dinners. She watched. She had a way of looking at you that made you feel like she was reading your bone structure. There was one Sunday, 3 years before the hospital, that changed everything. Serena was excited. She had just landed a massive contract for a community arts center. It was a career-defining moment. She started to tell the table about the difficulty of the project, how the electrical contractor had tried to overcharge them by $40,000 because he thought she didn't know how to read a circuit map. "I walked him through the voltage requirements for the kiln room," Serena said, her eyes bright. "You should have seen his face when he realized I'd already called the inspector." Richard didn't even wait for her to finish the sentence. Speaking of inspectors, Richard said, turning to his business partner, did you hear what happened at the city council meeting regarding the zoning for the new tower? The mayor is being a total... The conversation pivoted, just like that. Serena was cut off mid-breath. She didn't get angry. She didn't snap. She just deflated. She picked up her fork and pushed a pea around her plate. But Eleanor saw it. Eleanor saw the light go out in Serena's eyes. She saw the way Serena's hand trembled slightly as she put her wine glass down. Later that night in the kitchen, Eleanor found Serena. The kiln room, Eleanor, Eleanor said. Serena looked up, startled. What? The kiln room, you were telling a story. How did it end? Serena laughed, a bitter short sound. It doesn't matter, Eleanor. Richard had a better story. I didn't ask for a better story, Eleanor said. I asked for yours. Serena told her. She told her about the victory, about the $40,000 she saved the project, about the look on the man's face when he realized he couldn't bully her. Eleanor nodded. She didn't offer a platitude. She didn't say Richard is just stressed. She said the world is full of men who think they are the sun, and we are just the planets revolving around them. They forget that the sun eventually burns out. The stars are the ones that stay. Serena didn't know it then, but that was the night Eleanor started her secret ledger. People thought Eleanor Whitfield was a socialite. They saw the Westport house and the pearls and the quiet garden. They forgot who she was in 1984. Eleanor didn't inherit Whitfield capital. She birthed it. In the 80s, private equity was a boys' club that didn't even have a ladies' room. Eleanor had been a junior analyst who realized she was smarter than every VP in the building. When she asked for a promotion, they told her she was too emotional for the big trades. So she quit. She took $200,000, every cent she had, and rented a windowless office. She didn't buy a desk. She used a door balanced on 2 sawn-off filing cabinets. She grew that firm into a $500 million powerhouse. She did it by being invisible. While the men were at steakhouse lunches bragging about their wins, Eleanor was in the basement of the library, reading the fine print that everyone else missed. She knew that power isn't about who shouts the loudest. It's about who holds the most information. She raised Richard in that world. She thought she was teaching him strength, but as she got older, she realized she had taught him arrogance instead. She watched her son become a man who valued the status over substance. He drove a car he couldn't quite afford to impress people he didn't like. He married Serena because Serena was beautiful and capable and made him look like a power couple. But Richard never actually looked at Serena. He never saw the late nights she spent at her drafting table. He never saw the way she balanced their books when his law firm had a bad quarter. Eleanor saw. She started dropping by Serena's office unannounced. She would sit on a stool and watch Serena work. She saw the precision. She saw the grit. You're carrying him, Eleanor said one afternoon, watching Serena highlight a budget sheet. Serena didn't look up. We're a team, Eleanor. No, Eleanor said. A team moves in the same direction. You're a pack mule, Serena. And the problem with being a pack mule is that eventually your back breaks and the person riding you just finds a new horse. Serena finally looked up. Her eyes were tired. I just need us to be okay. If I handle the stress, he can focus on his career. That's what a wife does. Eleanor felt a chill in her chest, not of anger, but of recognition. She had said those exact words 40 years ago, and it had cost her everything. She decided then that Serena wasn't going to pay the same price. The diagnosis came in February. Stage 4, aggressive. A matter of months, the doctor said. Eleanor asked Richard to drive her to the appointment. She wanted to give him a chance to be a son. She wanted to see if, in the face of death, the asset manager would disappear and the child would emerge. They sat in the car in the hospital parking garage after the appointment. The silence lasted 43 seconds. Eleanor wasn't crying. She was waiting. She was waiting for him to touch her shoulder. She was waiting for him to say, Mom, I'm so sorry. Instead, Richard cleared his throat. He didn't look at her. He looked at the steering wheel. So, Richard said, we should probably talk about the estate documents. If you have the original deeds for the Westport house and the stock certificates for the firm, we should get them into a trust before things get complicated. Tax-wise, it's a nightmare if we wait until the end. Eleanor felt the last thread of hope snap. Her son wasn't grieving a mother. He was auditing a portfolio. "I'm not dead yet, Richard," she said quietly. I know," he said, finally looking at her with a practiced, efficient smile. "I'm just trying to protect you. You worked so hard for all this. I don't want the government taking 40% of it because we were sentimental." "Sentimental," Eleanor whispered. "Exactly. I'll call Douglas Fairfax. He's your attorney, right? We'll set up a meeting for Monday." "No," Eleanor said. "No. I'll handle Douglas. You just drive the car, Richard." That night, Eleanor didn't sleep. She sat in her garden even though it was freezing. She looked at the dead tomato vines and the frozen earth. She realized that Richard viewed her life as a liquidity event. She called Douglas Fairfax the next morning, but she didn't tell Richard. "Douglas," she said, "I need a psychological evaluation. I want it on the record that I am of sound mind. I want a witness who isn't a family member. And I want to rewrite the entire bequest." "Eleanor," Douglas warned, "Richard is going to fight this. He's a lawyer. He'll go for undue influence." "Let him," Eleanor said. Her voice was like iron. "I'm going to give him enough rope to hang his own reputation, and then I'm going to give Serena the world." Fast forward to the day of her death. Serena is in the room. Richard is in the hallway. Serena hears the phone call. She hears him talking about bypassing the freeze on the accounts. She walks into the hallway. Richard looks up, startled. He hangs up the phone. "I was just notifying the firm," he says. "You know how it is. People need to know." "She's been dead for 10 minutes, Richard," Serena says. Her voice is different now. It's not the gracious wife voice. It's the kiln room voice. "I'm just being efficient, Serena. Don't be emotional." "I'm not being emotional," she says. "I'm being observant." They go home. Richard spends the next 3 days in the study. He's already looking at real estate in the city. He wants a penthouse. He wants to move out of the boring Westport house. He talks about selling Eleanor's firm to a larger conglomerate. "It's a relic," he says over dinner, barely looking at Serena. "The brand is old. We'll flip it, take the cash, and I can finally start my own practice. You can even have a bigger office for your little design thing." Serena says nothing. She thinks about the $40,000 she saved. She thinks about the 3 a.m. tea she made for Eleanor. She thinks about the letter Eleanor told her about. The room at Fairfax and Associates is silent. Richard is wearing his most expensive suit. He looks like a man who has already won. He has a notepad out. He's ready to take notes on the assets. Douglas Fairfax clears his throat. "The estate of Eleanor Ann Whitfield," he begins. He goes through the minor bequests, some money to the gardener, a donation to the local library, the Westport house to Richard. Richard nods. "Standard," he whispers to Serena. Then Douglas pauses. He looks at Richard, then he looks at Serena. "Regarding the 61% majority interest in Whitfield Capital Partners," Douglas reads, "and all associated liquid holdings, including the Q3 bond portfolios." Richard leans forward. "I leave these in their entirety to my daughter-in-law, Serena Ann Caldwell." The sound that came out of Richard wasn't a word, it was a wheeze. "What?" he hissed. That's a typo. Douglas, check the name again." "There is no typo, Richard," Douglas says. "She's an interior designer," Richard shouts, standing up. "She doesn't know a bond from a Band-Aid. This is undue influence. Serena, what did you do to her? What did you say to her in those last weeks?" Serena doesn't answer. She feels a strange, cold calm washing over her. "I didn't say anything, Richard," she says. "I just listened." "There is a letter," Douglas says, opening a second envelope. "Eleanor was very clear. This is to be read if the bequest is questioned. To my son, Richard, you will be angry when you hear this. You will call it a mistake. You will call it emotional. But I am the woman who built this firm from a door on 2 filing cabinets. I don't make mistakes. And I am never emotional about money. I am leaving the firm to Serena because she is the only person I have ever met who understands that a business isn't a machine. It's a living thing. She carried you when you were too proud to ask for help. She protected your dignity while you were busy trying to crush hers. She saw me as a person when you saw me as an estate tax. Richard, you asked me in a parking garage to give you my life's work while I was still processing my own death. You didn't ask how I felt. You didn't ask if I was scared. You asked for the certificates. Well, here is your lesson in value. The value of a man is measured by what he does when no one is looking, and I have been looking for a long time. Serena, my dear, finish the story about the kiln room. You have the floor now. No one is going to interrupt you ever again. Richard didn't take it quietly. He sued. He dragged Serena through the mud. He told the papers she was a gold digger. He tried to claim she had manipulated a dying woman. But Eleanor had been 2 steps ahead. She had filmed the psychological evaluation. She had kept a diary of the Sunday dinners. She had even kept a recording of the 43 seconds in the parking garage. She turned on her phone's voice memo app because she knew her son better than he knew himself. The judge didn't just rule for Serena. He dismissed the case with prejudice. Serena didn't celebrate. She didn't call anyone. She simply went home, made tea, and sat in Eleanor's garden until the stars came out. Richard lost his partnership at the law firm. The scandal was too much. The efficient man was now a liability. Serena didn't gloat. She walked into the 19th floor offices of Whitfield Capital Partners. She sat in Eleanor's chair. She didn't sell the firm. She took those little design skills and she applied them to the portfolio. She didn't just look at numbers, she looked at the people behind the companies. She invested in founders who were being overlooked. She invested in women who were being talked over. Within 2 years, the firm's value had doubled. She divorced Richard, not out of spite, but because she realized she didn't need to make room for him anymore. She was the sun. She didn't need to be a planet. Serena still lives in the Westport house. The garden is thriving. The tomatoes are huge. Sometimes she sits on the porch with a cup of Earl Grey tea, properly steeped, just the way Eleanor liked it. She realized that the unspoken chapter of her life wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the firm. It was about the realization that silence is a choice. You can stay quiet to keep the peace, or you can stay quiet to gather your strength. There are hidden truths in every untold story. Not because the people involved don't know them. Zero, but because they are waiting for the right moment to speak. Richard Caldwell thought his wife was a silent partner. He forgot that in the quietest rooms, the heartbeat is the loudest thing you hear. Thank you for being part of the Unspoken Chapter. If you've ever been the one holding it all together while no one noticed, this story was for you. You are seen, you are valued, and your time to speak is coming. Drop a comment below. Tell us, have you ever been the quiet one in the room? What happened when you finally spoke? Like, share, and subscribe. Because the stories that aren't told are usually the only ones that matter. We'll see you in the next chapter.